Olá, eu sou o Ricardo Esteves Ribeiro. A destruição em Gaza só aumentou desde que vos falei a última vez sobre a Palestina, há cerca de 2 meses, aqui, neste feed podcast. Na altura, republicámos a série Palestina, Histórias de um País Ocupado, numa tentativa de trazer, por entre a urgência do momento, alguma história, algum contexto, alguma investigação sobre a ocupação da Palestina que dura há mais de 75 anos. Os últimos números falam em quase 20 mil pessoas mortas, quase 2 milhões deslocadas, milhares desaparecidas. As bombas continuam a cair, a destruir campos de refugiados, hospitais, ambulâncias, bairros residenciais e a atingir as zonas que o próprio exército israelita assinalou como seguras. Os dias passam, o desespero aumenta e o regime sionista não mostra intenções de travar o genocídio. Mas já que os olhos do mundo estão postos em Gaza, ainda que cada vez menos, escolhemos hoje falar sobre a Cisjordânia. Só este ano, já quase 500 pessoas foram mortas nessa parte da Palestina, separada de Gaza pelo Estado sionista. 290 desde 7 de outubro. Neste momento, assistimos a um brutal aumento da perseguição estatal à resistência popular não-violenta. Várias fontes que conhecemos há anos, pessoas que entrevistámos na Palestina, ou nos disseram onde ir, com quem falar, têm sido atacadas pelo exército ou por colonos israelitas. Esta semana foi a vez de mais um dos ativistas do campo de refugiados de Aida, em Belém. Mundera, assistente social, dirigente do Aida Youth Center e membro do Comitê de Coordenação de Luta Popular. Na noite de domingo para segunda, soldados entraram em casa dentro, agrediram o seu irmão, os seus filhos e raptaram-no vendado. Ainda não tem acusação. Antes de 7 de outubro, eram já mais de 1.300 as pessoas detidas sem acusação em prisões sionistas. Os números só aumentaram desde aí. Mundera é mais uma delas. Para entender o papel do exército israelita na ocupação, republicamos esta entrevista com Ori Givati, feita em maio de 2021. Até já. Seja toda a gente bem-vinda ao É Apenas Fumaça, um programa Fumaça onde se fala sobre a sociedade com quem quer falar sobre ela. Eu sou o Ricardo Esteves Ribeiro. Hoje temos como convidado Ori Givati, porta-voz e responsável pelas relações internacionais da Breaking the Silence, uma organização sem fins lucrativos de ex-militares israelitas que partilham testemunhos de como a ocupação na Palestina é praticada. Esta entrevista vai ser feita em inglês. Welcome to Fumaça, Ori.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to start by playing a video recorded this month in Jerusalem. In the footage, we can see Palestinian musician Mariam Afifi being arrested by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and questioning one of the soldiers.
What did I do? Just defending a girl who was being beaten? That's why I'm arrested now? Defending people that are going to be kicked out of their houses? How do you feel? No, I know that you're a human and maybe you have a family, you have kids. Do you want your kids to grow up and to grow old defending their own side, defending the oppressors? This is what you wanted to be when you were young, when you were a child, to be in their own side. This is what you wanted. When you were a child dreaming to grow up and having big dreams, this is what you wanted? To be in the side of oppressors?
What did you want to become when you were growing up?
I grew up to this concept that the most important thing I will do with my life and the best thing that I can do with myself when I turn 18 is to become a combat soldier in the Israeli army. And this is what our entire system directs us to do. So it comes from our education system, it comes from our media, it comes from our families. We grow up to believe that what we do in the Israeli army is pure and is the best thing that we can do with ourselves. I always wanted to become a combat soldier because I wanted to protect my country and to protect my family and to protect my friends and to get under there is a saying in Hebrew, להיכנס מתחת לאלונקה, meaning get under the injured, this thing that you carry injured people with, and join the struggle and protect the people who will protect me, who protected me, and protect the people who will protect me after I finish the army. And I never doubted this question. I never knew, for example, I never learned in history class, that since 1967 we've been occupying millions of people with our military. When we study about the 6-Day War in history class, we study it as the best thing that ever happened in Israel, as something that we should be proud of. We don't learn the next thing, the fact that since that war, millions of Palestinians are under our military dictatorship. And so when you're a young Israeli, let's say in most cases, of course, always there will be the odds, but in most cases, you grow up wanting to become a combat soldier. And in 2010, when I joined the army, I was extremely motivated to be part of this.
Before that, for 22 days between December 2008 and January 2009, so probably maybe a year and a few months before you joined the army, Israel bombarded the Gaza Strip in one of the biggest massacres of the last decades in Palestine. Over 1,400 Palestinians and 13 Israelis were killed during what Israel called the Operation Cast Lead.
Yeah.
Where were you when this was happening?
Actually, I'm happy you're asking this question, because during that operation, Cast Lead, this military operation, I was actually studying in Costa Rica, in Central America. I was part of an international program to do high school around the world. And during the Operation Cast Lead, there was a lot of discussion in our school, in our high school, because everyone there were very political and there were people from all over the world. And that was the first time in my life that I heard doubts, that I heard questions about the way about our military conduct in the occupied territories. And there was a big discussion in the school about what's happening in Gaza during the operation.
Because you were there, or the discussion just happened?
No,
because you were an Israeli.
There was an organized discussion by the school because they saw that everyone is asking questions and everyone are super interested, right? So the school itself organized the discussion, okay? And in the discussion, we the Israelis had a moment to speak, and the Palestinian students, which were also in Costa Rica, also had an opportunity to speak. By the way, the Palestinian that I met in Costa Rica, Abed, is the first Palestinian I have ever met in my entire life. Yeah, I've lived 17 years in Israel until that point and never met a Palestinian. Only in Central America I met a Palestinian.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the center of Israel in a village. It's called Kfar Monash. It's around Netanya, north from Tel Aviv. And in the discussion, the Palestinian Abed presented his point of view about what's happening. And it was very emotional, and he was extremely, he was crying because his people were being murdered, murdered.
Yeah.
And after him, it was our turn to speak. And I remember myself standing there and defending Israel with all of my might. And I said things that you can still hear today when you hear the Israeli hasbara, the Israeli propaganda abroad, talking about Gaza. And I said that everything we are doing there is the necessary minimum to protect our people, and that any other country would act exactly the same.
Which is exactly what Netanyahu
is saying. Exactly what Netanyahu is saying. Definitely. This is what I used to say.
There's this interview he did a few weeks back where he was interviewed by an American journalist, and he said exactly the same.
Exactly,
what would you do if there were thousands of rockets in New York or Washington, right?
Exactly. It's exactly what he says, and it's exactly what I said. Again, remember, I just spoke about my entire childhood believing that we are pure, right? And I have to tell you that after doing my military service. And after a few years later than that, right? So now I'm talking about 2015, 16, when I learned more and I was way more interested and I could finally think critically about what we're doing in the occupied territories, not only in Gaza, yeah? I understood that I lied to my friends in high school. And I actually told them that. I reached out to them to tell them that. I told them, look, what we are doing in the occupied territories, our military dictatorship over the Palestinian people, the strikes on Gaza, yeah, is not because of what I told you it is. I wouldn't say it's 100% completely not related to security. It's even bad to say that, because it's actually worse. That's the way we choose. That's the way we choose to fight. That's the way we choose to control. There are other ways to achieve security.
We're going to talk about that. Talk about your experience during mandatory service, so from 2010 onwards.
So can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Talk about your experience during your mandatory service
Of
at
course.
the military.
Okay, so I joined the army in 2010. I was a tank commander for the mandatory 3 years. In Israel, everyone must join the army.
So conscription is 3 years? Is it
3 years. Today, it's 2 years and a half. When I served, it's 3 years. Okay.
It usually starts around 18 years old,
after
right?
high school, immediately after high school. I served from 2010 to 2013. And
Where were you assigned?
yeah, so I was in my mandatory service, an instructor of how to become tank commanders. Okay, that was my main part in the army, in the mandatory service, and I did a week in Hebron. I did maybe 2 weekends around Gaza. In my mandatory service, I didn't serve a lot in the occupied territories, but it's important for me to say that in the army, there is a very big contrast between what you are trained to do to what you're actually doing. Okay? So tank commanders, when they finish their training, they go to operate in the occupied territories. Okay? They go to do checkpoints and invade homes and patrol the streets. Okay? And artillery officers also, and infantry also. Okay? So there is a contrast between what you are trained to do and what you're actually doing. And I would take you a few years later to when I actually did a 3-week service in the occupied territories in reserves duty.
Right after the conscription, after the mandatory service.
So reserves duty is in Israel, after you finish your mandatory service, not all soldiers, but some of the soldiers, until they are 40, have to go back to the army for a few days every year. To help, to cover for other soldiers who, for many different reasons. And it was in 2016, 3 years after I already finished my mandatory service, that I was called on reserves duty into the occupied territories around the city of Kalkilia. And in these 3 weeks, I took part.
And that's in the West Bank, so like in the north of the West Bank.
In the north, definitely. In the north of West Bank, around the village of Azun. That's the area.
It's a city that is actually surrounded by the wall that Israel started constructing after 2002, right?
Yes.
So it's like right there in the border of West Bank and what Israel calls the state.
Yes, right there. And in these 3 weeks, I took part in a variety of the missions that are done daily in the occupied territories by us. Okay, so checkpoints, invasions to villages, patrols, car patrols, walking patrols around Palestinian villages, and so forth. And it was actually after this reserves duty that I reached like a tipping point. That I decided, of course, it wasn't the only thing, right? It's a process, but it was the tipping point for me that I decided that I can't go on working in agriculture, which that was my job at the time, in the north of Israel, completely ignoring and staying indifferent to our control of the Palestinian people and the way we control them. And not only that I think it's wrong, I also just took part in it. So I have a responsibility. I can't just go on with my life. And of course, it was a long process, but eventually I decided to quit my job in agriculture and join the struggle to end occupation and join Breaking the Silence.
But explain what was your mission when you were deployed in Qalqilia?
All right. So the first thing that my commander told me when I arrived to Qalqilia was our mission in this area is to make all the Palestinians in the area feel like they cannot lift their head up. Okay?
Like exactly like that.
Exactly like that. I remember it so well. Now, it's important for me to emphasize here. He didn't tell me our mission is to make all the dangerous Palestinians or all the violent Palestinians. He said all of the Palestinians. Our mission in the occupied territories is to make all of the Palestinians feel like they cannot lift their head up. And how do we do it? Exactly doing the different types of missions that I did. And I think it's very important to understand that while sometimes, of course, we see horrifying incidents that are done by soldiers, every single day is horrifying. Every checkpoint, every home invasion is horrifying.
What do you mean by home invasion? And what do you mean by checkpoint? Like some people, most of the people who listen to this, never been to Palestine, don't know what a checkpoint is. Explain what those things are.
All right, so I'll start with home invasions, okay? So home invasions are done around, in our latest study, which we published with two other organizations a few months ago, 267 times a month, okay? Only for searches and arrests. By the Israeli military. Now, what is a home invasion? Home invasion is with a group of fully armed soldiers, weapons, grenades, uniforms, A group of, let's say, between 5 to 10 soldiers, usually, sometimes more, sometimes less, invade a Palestinian home, and then, from that point, we have a variety of different types of invasions, okay? So it can be for arrests, and some people deserve to be arrested. Okay, I'm not saying some people deserve to be arrested, but the vast majority of home invasions are not to arrest people. They are done, for example, for training. A new unit comes to serve in the occupied territories, and the first arrest that they will do, they will invade a Palestinian home, again, fully armed, in the middle of the night, arrest one of the people from the home, usually the father or the older brother, and after a few minutes, after a few hours, we'll bring him back home. Why? Because it's a mission called a mock arrest. We are arresting someone that we know for sure that is innocent, and we do it because maybe the next day we will have someone who is more dangerous. So we need to practice.
So you're using Palestinians as a means for your training.
Definitely. Now, maybe we can elaborate that later, but trainings happens in other circumstances, not only home invasions. But I want to give one other example of home invasion. Another type of home invasion is called mappings. Okay, a group of soldiers invade a Palestinian home, again, middle of the night, fully armed. One soldier draws the way the home looks like. Okay, so how many windows, how many doors, how many rooms. Another soldier usually takes pictures of the family members. Okay, so put them one by one next to the wall, takes their pictures, and that's it. That's the mission. Again, in mappings, we check before we enter that there are no Palestinians in that home. That there are no violent Palestinians. We check that there are innocent, because the mission is not to arrest. We don't want to face trouble.
To make sure they're not guilty of anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, what's the justification by the military for this? Intelligence. Okay. We need to know how all the homes in the occupied territories looks like. Okay. But now I want to take you to our testimonies in breaking the silence. Yeah. And we have a testimony of a soldier that comes back home after a few mapping missions that he did. And he does the laundry, and he finds all the drawings of the homes in his pockets. Or another testimony of a soldier that took pictures of the family members, and he asked his commander, what should I do with all these pictures? And his commander said, we don't really need the pictures. Yeah. Now, these are just two examples. Yeah? We have other examples like turning a home into a military post. Yeah. But I want to take us back for a second what I said that my mission was. Make all the Palestinians feel like they cannot lift their head up, right? How can we do that? One of the ways to do it is that every Palestinian, not only the people who know they did maybe something that they shouldn't have, yeah, according to Israel, yeah, or wrote a post in Facebook against the occupation, even the most indifferent, silent, peaceful Palestinian, that didn't participate in anything, even his home can be invaded in the middle of the night. And that's how we control the Palestinians. In other units, this mission is called, this task, yeah, is called make all the Palestinians feel like they're always being chased. Yeah, make Palestinians feel like someone is watching over their shoulder. It comes in different terms in every different unit and different times.
But always said like so bluntly like that?
Yes. It's important to clarify. What I'm saying here is not my words. It's not Ori the activist words. These are military aims, military goals that are written on paper. Okay?
Yeah.
So
explain the checkpoints.
Okay, so most people think that checkpoints are only between the west side of the Green Line and the east side of the Green Line. Okay? So only between Israel and the occupied territories. Israel proper and the occupied territories, yeah?
Between the border, you mean? Like between even like the wall, right?
Yeah, exactly. Fact is that most checkpoints are not those checkpoints. Are not to
and maybe
check.
to explain it further, the checkpoint would be something like as in Portuguese we would call like the ocupação stop, right? We would have to, like, cars would have to stop, be searched or not, like sometimes be searched, sometimes not, in order to move ahead and move further in
exactly. So we can see it in many times between countries, right, and things like that. But most checkpoints are not those. Most checkpoints in the West Bank today are flying checkpoints, we call them, random checkpoints, okay? So in every car, every military patrol vehicle, there is a box that contains like the tools to open a checkpoint wherever you want, okay?
What's the name of that car?
In Hebrew, it's called David, like David.
What's the meaning of that?
David is for a figure from the Bible. I'm not a Bible expert, but he's one of the kings of Israel in the Bible.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in this box there is all the tools we need to open a checkpoint. Now, I think the best way to describe checkpoints is through one of my experiences. So in 2016, my commander asks me, tells me that we have an opportunity today. We are joined by a border police unit, and we will go and open a checkpoint together between two Palestinian villages. Okay? So the aim was to show Palestinian drug traffickers that were also there. That's exactly what I was told. Okay, how will we show them we're there? We open a checkpoint in the middle of the night. Yeah, so we drive to that point. We open the checkpoint quickly with the spikes and the stop signs and stuff like that. And it was completely dark. Okay, there was no moon, there were no traffic lights. And I remember myself standing there, and this big truck comes, and the border police soldiers talk to the driver, check the truck. Okay, now it wasn't our mission. We were not told, look, we're looking for this ID of this dangerous Palestinian. We weren't told anything. We were told, open a checkpoint to show them we are there. Okay, that's the mission. So they check the truck, even though it wasn't a part of the mission. The truck goes. Another car comes. There were a few young people in this car. We take them out of the car. Again, people check their car. And I remember myself standing there in the middle of the night. I can't see anything, okay? I'm scared that someone will run me over, not intentionally, just because no one can see me. That's the situation. And I'm thinking to myself about my childhood and the way I was raised and everything I was told about the military. And I'm standing there between two Palestinian villages, okay? So I'm not on the way to Israel. I'm not even on the way to a settlement. Yeah, a settlement is where Israelis go to live in the West Bank. And I'm thinking to myself, how is what I'm doing now related to the security of my family or my friends?
Journalist Ben Henrenreich, he writes his book, The Way to the Spring, Life and Death in Palestine. And he writes, the prime purpose of the occupation was not to take land or push people from their homes. It did that too, of course, and effectively, but overall, with its checkpoints and its walls and its prisons and its permits, it functioned as a giant humiliation machine, a complex and sophisticated mechanism for the production of human despair.
Interesting. I didn't read it. It sounds really interesting. Look.
At what point did you start doubting the military service?
Look, it's hard to put a finger on it, okay? But I will give you one of the most important moments of my life, and that was actually in mandatory service, okay? Before I had the 3-week experience, right? The 3-week service in the occupied territories.
So 2010 to 2013.
Yeah, so now I'm talking about 2012. In 2012, there was another operation in Gaza, a pillar of defense. And I remember myself, we were stationed with our tanks right on the border of Gaza. And a lot of people came there, a lot of soldiers from different units and reserves duty. And it was hundreds of soldiers around us and dozens of military vehicles, tanks, APCs, and so forth. And I was walking around this area where we were like getting ready to invade Gaza. And I saw a group of soldiers, reserves duty soldiers, talking about how they are so excited to go in and kill Arabs. That's what they said, okay? And I saw this and I was quite shocked because I asked myself, why would someone want to kill people? Like what? Why? What make them say that? And by the end of this week, we didn't invade Gaza eventually. The ground invasion was cancelled, but the airstrike, of course, happened. Yeah, but just the ground invasion was cancelled. And then I thought to myself, after the week ended, and it was the scariest week of my life, okay? By far. Like rockets falling next to me, like people, yeah, like everything around us is war. Yeah, we need to hide from rockets every 5 minutes. That's the level, okay? And I remember myself after this week, and I was thinking to myself, I actually was also very motivated to invade Gaza. I was so shocked by this group of reserve duty soldiers talking about how they want to kill Arabs, but I also wanted to participate in the war. And it was a very hard realization for me. And I started thinking to myself, what events during my life made me so eager, so motivated to participate in a war? Because I'm not a violent person, I never hit a human being in my life. So why should I want to participate in a war? What happened? Who was it? What system was working on me so hard? And this was the first moment that I started really thinking critically about what's happening. And it was 1 year left to my mandatory service, and I finished my mandatory service, and then I went to work in agriculture, and I read and I learned. It's a long process, but I can definitely say that the first major turning point was that week, even though it didn't lead me to very big decisions at that time.
And so why then did you come back, right? Because you were then 3 years afterwards, you were called as a reserve duty. Why did you go back?
Look, the forces that are working on us to comply, and again, they start from the moment we are born, and also all the time, also now, are so strong. They are so strong. They are my justification for going to serve in the occupied territories in 2016 was I don't want to let down my friends. I don't want to be seen as someone who is ditching his friends in the fight, right? You don't want to leave your friends behind. This was my justification back then. And it's not the only thing, right? The social pressure, the fact that it's actually not doing that is going against every single thing in your upbringing. And it's a hard decision.
Did you ever feel like you were the good soldier when compared to those soldiers who wanted to kill Arabs, quote unquote?
Of course. This notion of being the good soldier, of saying, I want to participate. I want to take part in the occupation as a soldier because I can improve the occupation, is a very common notion in Israel. Okay, for people who say that they are against the occupation. Now, I want to give you an example from my experience. So again, reserves duty 2016. I'm called by my commander. He tells me another unit captured 4 Palestinians, and that these Palestinians were in a place they shouldn't have been. That's what I'm told. Okay, and they are now coming to our base, and you need to guard them. And I am super excited at that point because I always wanted to be the person who is directly responsible for interactions with Palestinians. So these 4 Palestinians arrived to our base, handcuffed, blindfolded. We put them in 4 chairs in front of the fence of the base. Now, important to...
The base meaning not a jail.
Exactly, that's the next thing. It's not a jail, it's not a detention center. It's not a place where people are supposed to be held. Around them, soldiers are in their pajamas. Okay, that's the level. I'm in my uniform because I have a task, right? So I need to be with my uniform and with my weapon, and I'm standing next to them, and I'm starting to think, how can I improve the situation? Because it doesn't look like a good situation. And I ask them if they want to listen to music. And they say no. And I ask them if they want to eat something. And they say no. And I ran out of ideas. And I'm standing there, 4 Palestinians, handcuffed, blindfolded, in the middle of the base. They didn't want to listen to music or eat something, which to me seemed like amazing ideas at the time. Yeah. Now when I look back, I do think it's ridiculous. But as a soldier, that's the way you think. Okay. And I'm standing there disappointed that I couldn't change the situation, that I couldn't improve the occupation. And what is the difference? What is the real difference? I'm asking myself, what is the real difference between me, who has the best intentions? Yeah, I want to make the occupation moral. I don't want to be violent and so forth. What is the difference between me and the most violent soldier in my unit? That I always look at him and he say, "Oh, this guy is so racist. I don't want to be him," right? And yes, maybe he would be a bit more, but it doesn't change the situation. And I think the best way to clarify this is to take us to a harsher example. Okay, so for example, we talk about training. Yeah, a group of soldiers invade in the middle of the night to invade a home to arrest someone for training.
The mock arrest you were talking about.
The mock arrest. What does it matter if this group of soldiers, even all of them, all of this group of soldiers want to improve the occupation and be the good soldier, they will still invade this family's home in the middle of the night, fully armed, to arrest someone for training. So they will be a little bit more nicer to the children. They still woke them up, fully armed. Doesn't matter. We have testimony from a soldier that participated in many arrests, okay? And he said how in the first arrest that he did, he came with candy in his pockets. And he handed out the candy to the kids in the homes they invaded. And he says how in the first arrest he did that. In the second arrest he did it. But by the fifth arrest, he stopped doing it. And his quote is, the way he described this is, "I'm giving kids candy, but I'm taking away their father."
How did you get to know Breaking the Silence?
So after my reserves duty, at the time in 2016, it was one of the most hard, let's say, attacks on breaking the silence. Okay, so the Prime Minister Netanyahu accused breaking the silence in that they need to be checked if they are spies, and other ministers, and breaking the silence is under a very heavy attack. Okay,
yeah.
I see this.
Yeah, former defense minister and chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Forces, Moshe Alon, said it became clear that this is an organization operating with malicious motives. Right?
Exactly.
And then also the former minister of finance and head of the Yesh Atid party said the Breaking the Silence had, quote, crossed the red line between criticisms and subversion. Also, there was a few members of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, that tried to outlaw the organization with a law.
Yeah.
Obviously, didn't happen. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the Breaking the Silence lies and slanders our soldiers internationally, right? So there's multiple representatives that have voiced opposition to Breaking the Silence, especially during that time, right?
Yes, exactly. By the way, it still goes on, okay? It was special in that time. It was a massive attack, but it still goes on until today. Only recently, before the last elections, we were again attacked by right-wing politicians, okay? It's part of our day-to-day life today. Anyway, I finished this reserve duty. I hear all these politicians that I already don't like at that point of my life, yeah? And I go and check what is breaking the silence. Yeah, I didn't really know. Maybe I heard the name a few times before, but I didn't really know. And I read testimonies of soldiers who did a checkpoint like I did, yeah, who were in charge of Palestinian detainees like I did, who invaded homes, who invaded villages, who did patrols, who did all the same things that I just did. So I know that they are not lying because I just did it. And I see these attacks by these politicians that promote, seriously, 100% of what these people promote is against my values. And against, I think, any person's values who believes in democracy and equality and human rights. And I said to myself, okay, if they are attacking breaking the silence so hard, maybe that will be a good way for me to contribute. Because at that moment, I already decided that I want to work against occupation. And how will I work against occupation? If I already did it, I already took an active part in it, I need to take responsibility. How can I take responsibility? I will start speaking about the things that I did.
Did you immediately tell your story to Breaking the Silence once you joined?
No, but the reason for this, actually, it's a good thing to talk about. The reason for why not, because it took me time to really understand that in these 3 weeks, I participated in so many types of missions that people have no idea that are happening, like the random checkpoint or like the Palestinian detainees and so forth. Okay, so, and it's something that happens a lot with our testifiers. I was a researcher in Breaking the Silence in the first 2.5 years of my work. Okay, I interviewed over 120 soldiers who served in the occupied territories. And many of them, in the first moment we talk, say, I don't have anything to tell you. Yes, I serve in occupied territories. Yes, I support Breaking the Silence, but I don't have anything interesting to tell you. And I learned also about myself that it's usually not true. Because once you stood in a checkpoint, you have a story about how the occupation works. Once you invaded one home, you have a story about how the occupation works. And that's why, also to me, it took time to understand that I actually do have testimonies. I do have testimonies from the most routine missions that are done every single day in the occupied territories. And then I gave my testimony to Breaking the Silence after I already was a part.
Talk about the process of collecting and reviewing the testimonies.
Okay, so as I said, this was my job for 2.5 years. And this is the process. First, we find the testifiers, okay? So, of course, soldiers keep serving in occupied territories all the time. And by the way, the testimony collection project is the main work of our organization until today. Yeah, didn't change one bit. So, we find the soldiers who want to give their testimonies. Yeah, we do it because we try to be as accessible as possible. We go and stand in public locations. We participate in different events. We operate social media. We do everything in order to be accessible for these people. The second step is talking. And 100% of our testimonies are collected by an interview like me and you are doing now, recorded. Yeah, we know all of our testifiers. And we meet them at least one time. Sometimes we do 7 meetings, yeah, if needed, at least one time. And we do the interview. And in the interview, we talk about the service from the moment it started till the moment it ended, including everything. Nothing should be left out. Of course, only about the occupied territories. Okay, so West Bank and Gaza. We don't collect testimonies from operations in, Lebanon, Syria, like the Lebanon border, Syrian border, and Jordan and Egypt.
Okay.
Only West Bank and Gaza. So, yeah, we talk about the service. The testifier shares his experiences, of course, what they want to share, what is important for them. We finish the interview, and then we take it to a process of publishing. Okay, so what does this include? We transcribe the interview. We don't edit it. We simply cut out the stories, right? So we will not publish a 2-hour interview as one piece. So we cut different testimonies, like the time I did the checkpoint and so forth, cut. This time I invaded his home, cut, okay? But we don't edit the testimonies, and we publish them exactly in the words the soldiers used, okay? The testifiers used. It's important for us because our job is to bring the voice of the former soldiers that want to speak out against the occupation, how they want to do it, not how we want to do it. After we cut them out, they go through the process of verification. And we have a very hard, very strict process of verification.
So you fact check all
We
the stories.
fact check 100% of the stories, the testimonies. And I will tell you that about, I would say, 50% of testimonies we receive are not published because we can't verify them. It's not because, usually, it's not because someone came to lie in our faces. It's because we couldn't verify them. And our responsibility is to publish only the things we can stand behind. And that's why we have a very strict process and we publish only the things that we verified. And then after the verification, we go to the military censorship. Yeah, it's a law in Israel. We don't want to break the law. And it's a law of that every single thing that's published about the army needs to go through military censorship.
So there's state-legislated censorship in Israel.
Yes. And we obey that law. And I have to say that so far, we didn't really face trouble on that end. We were not censored, barely censored. And I think that's because, actually, it connects to what I said earlier. We're talking about everyday life in the occupied territories. You cannot censor that.
Although in 2019, around 200 articles were banned by the Israeli military censorship by media outlets. Almost 2,000 were partially redacted. Do you feel like breaking the silence is the result of guilt and shame from former soldiers more than it is an actual political intervention to oppose the occupation?
Yeah. Look, no. My answer is no. And first of all, we have over 1,200 people that testified for breaking the silence. Okay? And every single person addresses this issue completely differently. Okay? And yes, I'm not telling you we don't. I have shame that I participated in the occupation. Of course, I have guilt, a lot of guilt. But my actions and my activities and taking responsibility, I feel, is the best thing I can do to actually take responsibility for what I did and act. And doing that, I am doing that from extremely dedicated motivation to actually create change. And this is why I'm sitting with you here. I wouldn't be sitting with you here if I had shame, or only had shame. Yeah. And I feel that we are actually successful doing that. Okay. Of course, the occupation is still here, but and it's deteriorating. Yeah. But I feel and I know that with every new person that we talk to and every new media outlet that we spoke to, we are actually promoting change. Yeah.
And do you feel like the organization is a byproduct of Orientalism, as Professor Edward Said put it? So resulting from the fact that only Israeli voices, even when describing the occupation on the ground, are credible internationally, as opposed to Palestinian voices? I
definitely think that we have a big problem in the fact that Palestinian voices are not taken seriously enough. I agree with that completely. I think that, look, in our work, I wish there was also a Palestinian sitting with me here, okay? In our work in the occupied territories, when we are there, in our tours, in our lectures, in our activities, we have Palestinians that work with us. In Hebron, there is an organization called Youth Against Settlements. In the South Hebron Hills, we work with a variety of activists, Palestinian activists, and it's a very important part of our work. We try to do it as much as we can. Our mandate, and it's an advantage, it's a disadvantage, right? We are soldiers who break their silence. So a Palestinian, even if they wanted to be part of this organization, it's problematic, right? For them, I don't think any Palestinian will want to be a part of us, right? And I completely understand it. And that's why we're trying to create the bonds. And I have to tell you that in recent years, we created extremely strong bonds with Palestinian activists in the occupied territories. And it's one of the things that fills me personally with hope. And we try to help making their voices heard. But I agree with the criticism. It's a problem. Definitely.
It reads on the About Us section of your website, and I'm quoting, "Our work aims to bring an end to the occupation." What does occupation mean to Breaking the Silence?
Okay. So, occupation is the current status of the West Bank and Gaza. Yeah, 1967, we conquered West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, Egypt, right? Egypt, Golan Heights, it's a different story. We will not dig into it now. East Jerusalem was annexed, okay? And the West Bank and Gaza, since that moment, are under a military rule. That's a fact, right? Because the military commander of the occupied territories can tomorrow morning wake up, decide, okay, I want the law to be everyone must wear green shirts. He signs a paper, that's the law. And that's the situation in those territories, right? The soldiers...
And so Breaking the Silence doesn't feel like what Israel calls its state is an occupation by itself. Doesn't feel like Haifa is being occupied and Tel Aviv is being occupied, and that the occupation actually started before 1948.
Okay. Look, we definitely think that we have to be extremely critical, and the problems in the 48 zone, right? The west side of the Green Line, however you want to call it, Israel, Palestine, the land, you know.
Because probably if you ask, most Palestinians would say that the occupation started in 48 and not in 67.
Definitely, definitely. I understand it. But it's still important to make the distinction, because I'm not saying there isn't a big, gigantic problem in those areas. Definitely. Terrible discrimination and racism and police brutality. And really, no question. But the Israeli military is not the ruler in those areas. The military there isn't a military commander to the 48 zone. Okay? And that's why it's important to make the distinction, because we want to be also factual, right? So, yes, definitely, there is a big problem in the 48 zone. But it's not
a problem that Breaking the Silence addresses.
It's not a military occupation, and that's why in our mandate, I didn't serve there. Yeah? I
understand that, but what I'm asking is, do you believe that what happened in around the years of 1948 that is known by Palestinians as the Nakba, the catastrophe that basically led to the exile of around 800,000 people, was that an occupation?
It's hard for me to understand the question. So I do believe everything you said. Yeah?
I'm asking, is the state of Israel founded under an occupation in 1948? Was what happened in 1948 an occupation?
I think the term, that's just the term, I think we agree. But the term is wrong, because it's not a military occupation. It's a different way of ruling. Right? So yes.
But there was a military industry. There was a military institution in 1948, and there was a military rule with the Haganah, and so there was a project in 1948. What I'm asking is, so for example, multiple people, even for example, Israeli historian Ilan Pape writes in his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, on a cold Wednesday afternoon, 10 of March of 1948, a group of 11 men, veteran Zionist leaders, together with the young military Jewish officers, put the final touches on a plan for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That same evening, military orders were dispatched to units on the ground to prepare for the systematic expulsion of Palestinians from the vast areas of the country. The orders came with a detailed description of the methods to be employed to forcibly evict the people, large-scale intimidation, laying siege to and bombarding villages and population centers, setting fire to homes, properties and goods, expulsion, demolition, and finally planting mines in the rubble to prevent any of the expelled inhabitants from returning. Is this a military occupation in 1948? Is this what Ilan Pape is describing an occupation?
It's I agree with you. Okay, it's a military rule.
I'm not stating any opinion.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just asking you.
No, I know. I'm just the only thing it's important for me to clarify here. This is a military war. Okay, it's a war. It's when we use terrible practices to push Palestinians away from their homes in 1948. The Nakba, 700,000 Palestinian refugees. Terrible. But the only thing that is important to clarify is that after that, there wasn't a military rule. So I will correct. Yeah, there was a military rule on the Palestinian villages in Israel until 1966, right? But it wasn't a military occupation, just the term, because there wasn't after the war a military commander of Israel, right? There was military rule of the Palestinian villages. I agree, no question, yeah, that the 48 war included atrocities, ethnic cleansing, pushing Palestinians away from their homes. Definitely.
Could there be a state of Israel without an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians?
Could there be a state of Israel without ethnic cleansing of Palestinians? It's a good question, because what we see now in the occupied territories, for example, let's take an example. Okay, South Hebron Hills. We see a place where we are enforcing a policy that is meant to push Palestinians away from the villages that they grew up in and lived in for hundreds of years, push them away into the big Palestinian cities. What we see now is a process of forcible transfer, of displacement, and fragmenting the West Bank into different parts, which is definitely a process of trying to push people away from their homes, And I do think, on the other hand, that it's possible to I think that we can live together.
But that was not a question. My question is, could there be a state in 1948 without the expulsion and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians?
Okay. I think the clear answer is no. Because the state of Israel, as they wanted to found it at the time, was with a Jewish majority, right?
So can I assume that Breaking the Silence is anti-Zionist?
I think that the question of Zionism is actually, it's just not relevant anymore, as the way I see it. Okay? Because what was that? What is Zionism, right? Zionism was this wish by Jews in the beginning of the 19th century, the end of 19th century, the beginning of 20th century, to found this the Israeli state, the Jewish state in Israel, right? That was Zionism. By the way, in the beginning of Zionism, a lot of the claims were that we want to have equality. We don't want to push, some of them said, we don't want to push the Palestinians away. We can live together. There were different statements about that, right? But Zionism ended when Israel was founded, right? They made their mission. They created the state of Israel with the Jewish majority. Now, we are in a completely different phase. And
but being anti-Zionist, isn't it being against what happened in 1948? So, being against the legitimacy of Israel starting a state that would be, in your words, created only with ethnic cleansing? Because, I mean, you can be neutral on that, right? But you can also take a stance on being Zionist or being anti-Zionist. And there is legitimate criticism from the Palestinian left against Breaking the Silence because it never said that it was anti-Zionist, right?
Definitely.
And for example, Desmond Tutu, the South African Nobel Peace Prize winner, he says, if you are neutral in situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor.
Definitely.
Are you being neutral in terms of being Zionist or not?
I think that what we are about this question is not, I definitely think that we are not neutral, right? Because of what we're doing, right? I think the question of what happened in 48, the Nakba, the Palestinians, the claim that the wish of the right of return, all of these things are definitely things we should address and talk about and start talking about, because right now it's completely censored, right, in Israel. And I think that our actions are not neutral. I definitely don't see myself and Breaking the Silence as a neutral organization. I do think that the question of are you anti-Zionist or are you Zionist is not part of this current situation. And when we understand that we need to address all the different things, all the human rights violations, that we are responsible for and that I took part in since 1967, and of course that we need also to address things that happened before, but it's just not my mandate, right? I'm a human rights organization. I choose what I focus on. I didn't serve in 48. I didn't serve in 65 in the military rule. So I don't feel like it's my mandate to decide or to talk about exactly what happened at that point, because I didn't serve there. And we try to really focus on what we did. We don't want to reach out of our mandate. I'm not.
But you say in your about us that our work aims to bring an end to an occupation. So we need to also talk about what occupation actually means, right? And so you can say that, well, occupation means only as you also use the term occupied territories being Gaza and the West Bank, and you can say, let's just remove all our military from those occupied territories as you described it, and that's it. But it can also mean let's give the right to return to all the Palestinians that left Haifa or that left Tel Aviv. Do you believe in the right to return of Palestinians who were living in those villages and had to leave in 48?
I definitely believe that the question of the right of return should be answered. From what I know, from what I read, I never dealt with it, right? I know what I did. I am talking about what I did. But from what we all know, what we all read, the way to address this specific question is starting by recognizing the problem. And I definitely think we should recognize the problem. And then in the realistic solution of that, whether all of them will return or they will not return and so forth, this is something that is not my place. But to address and to recognize that there is a problem here, I definitely agree.
Do you support the international movement to boycott, sanction, and disinvest in Israel?
Yeah, the BDS. So, look. I'm an Israeli, I live in Israel, I buy in Israel, I eat in Israel. So it's quite problematic for me to say I am part of the BDS movement, right? I can't be, right? I used to be a soldier. It's quite late for that. But I do think that the BDS movement is extremely legitimate, is extremely important, and the boycotting as a way of non-violent resistance is an important and significant tool to achieve change. Boycotting Israel for the actions that we see in the occupied territories is a way to express your disagreement, your own political beliefs, and I think that anyone who chooses that is a good activist.
Let's talk about what happened this month. Early this month, news about the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah started making headlines in Western media outlets, including here in Portugal. Explain what happened.
Okay. So before that, I will talk about it, no problem. I just want to put a disclaimer. I didn't serve there, and so it's important. And we don't have a lot of testimonies from there, okay? Sheikh Jarrah is a neighborhood in East Jerusalem that Jewish people had their properties there before 1948, okay? And again, it's a long process, right? But after 48, Jordan ruled there, Jewish people, Palestinians moved into those homes that used to be owned by Jews. By the way, Palestinians who used to live inside 48, okay? So in Musrara neighborhood in Jerusalem, and some of them also in other cities, right? Yafo, Haifa, and so forth. And these Palestinians live there. And now And I'm not an legal expert, okay? So I don't want to dig into the deep details, okay? But now what's happening is that Israel, allow Jews, Israelis, to claim back those properties. So what actually happens there now is that we are taking Palestinians away from their homes, their families lived in their whole lives, yeah, and putting back in them Israelis. Okay. Now the worst part of the story is that the law is discriminatory because it allows Israelis to go back living in these homes, but it doesn't allow the Palestinians that actually live in these homes that have properties inside the 48 lines to claim their homes back. I think what's happening there is one of the most important examples of the way we choose to operate as a country. I think it's a shame. It's shameful. I don't have words to describe what I feel about this. But I also want to add that Sheikh Jarrah is a very, let's say, known case. But displacement and home demolitions and land theft happens all over the occupied territories. Okay, we see it in let's say Khums al-Fuka, a community in the Jordan Valley, that all of their homes were demolished using the military. Yeah, we can see it in home demolitions in South Hebron Hills, one of the most important cases to talk about now because we're approaching a court verdict about this case, okay? In firing zone 918.
In Jinba.
Yeah, in Jinba and 12 villages, not only Jinba. In firing zone 918, where we use the claim of firing zone to justify evictions from homes and home demolitions, okay? When the reality for a Palestinian living in the West Bank is that in Area C specifically, okay, it's a bit different in Area A and B, but Area C...
Yeah, it would be a long time to explain what Area A, B, and C, but there's a series called Palestina, histórias país, ocupado, where we explain all of that, so if you want to know more, go listen to that.
Yeah. So a Palestinian in Area C, when... Actually, let's give an example. I'm a Palestinian in Area C, okay? I want to build a home. I need to ask permission from the planning committee. Okay, in every place in the world there is a planning committee. But the planning committee in Area C is in the civil administration. Okay, the civil administration is part of the army. Who is sitting in that committee? Soldiers and settlers who work for the civil administration. So if I'm a Palestinian and I want to build a home in Area C, I need to ask permission to build my home from settlers and soldiers. There aren't Palestinian representatives in this committee. It's a discriminatory committee. Reality is that Palestinians in Area C almost never get the permission to build. What happens when you don't get the permission to build? You build, right? Because you have kids and you need your family is growing. You need to build something. So you build without permission. What happens when you build without permission? You get a demolition order on your home from the authorities, right? Because you didn't ask for you didn't get permission, so you build illegally, right? That will be the claim by Israel. And then we see a reality with hundreds of home demolitions every year in different places from different excuses. One time it can be a firing zone. One time it can be you didn't have permission. One time it can be you build in an archaeological site, the village of Susia, Palestinian village of Susia. So I'm saying all of this that because we have to understand, and I always fear this. I'm always scared from this, that some specific cases are on the news. But we forget that every day there is displacement. Every day there is forcible transfer, and every day there is home demolitions. So I hope that everyone who knows about Sheikh Jarrah will not stop there. We'll actually learn more and see the reality that we, Israel, are responsible for.
This month, we've witnessed another massacre in Gaza. Israeli airstrike killed 232 Palestinians, including 65 children. Thousands were wounded. 12 Israelis were killed by rockets fired by Hamas. Hundreds were injured. Israel also attacked healthcare facilities, including hospitals and the only coronavirus testing center operating in Gaza. 11 days after the beginning of the massacre, Hamas and the Israeli government declared a ceasefire. Is this ceasefire a victory for anybody?
Not at all. I just came from Israel, and I was
Your flight was moved like a week?
Yeah, my flight was actually cancelled. I was hiding from rockets, okay, shot by Hamas at my home in Tel Aviv. Yeah, that was the reality for a week. And of course, I'm happy that there is a ceasefire. It's always good that the fire will not be shot at anyone, yeah? But it's not a victory. Because what we did in Gaza in the last 12 days is, and by the way, in general, what we're doing in Gaza and the way we rule and control Gaza in the last, let's say, since the disengagement, okay, 2005, not only, but it grew way harsher since that time.
Meaning when the military came out of the...
Not the military. We took out all the settlements.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The military still operates.
Exactly, yeah.
I think it's one of the worst... I don't want to give grades, yeah? But for me personally, I can say it's devastating, because this is one of the clearest ways to see that it's impossible to be the good occupier. Yeah, when we look at the claims, right? Look at the claims by my country. We don't have any choice, right? Hamas is firing at innocent people, right? And Hamas is firing on innocent people. Definitely. Is firing rockets on innocent people. No question. But have a look on what we're doing. Yeah? We killed, as you said, 65 children in 12 days of a military operation. Everything you mentioned, right? Demolished buildings and all with the excuse that that's the minimum necessary, right? The minimum necessary to fight Hamas. We are trying to be surgical. Yeah, that's one of the ways that we described. We have extremely advanced technologies that can be very surgical, and we try to hit the target as well as we can, right? But look at the reality. Look at the results, right? And then let's look back on our testimonies, experiences as soldiers. For example, artillery. Yeah, artillery, which we used in this operation.
What does that mean?
Artillery is like it looks like a tank. It shoots kind of rockets, missiles. Shells, it's called shells. Probably it should be called to a long distance. So it's not like a tank when you shoot directly. It shoots, but it's a ballistical route. Okay, so it goes up and down, and it inflicts a lot of damage. Okay, it weighs a lot. It weighs like sometimes for a lot of kilos. Okay, I don't want to say something I don't know. Anyway. When we practice using artillery in training, okay, when soldiers practice using artillery in training, we talk about large, gigantic areas that we make sure that no one is there, right? To not harm anyone that shouldn't be harmed. When we look at the operation in Gaza, and I'm talking, I don't have testimonies yet from this one, okay? But I'm talking about prior experiences, mainly 2014, Protective Edge. We see that we use artillery to shoot in one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Okay? So there is a way to prevent those deaths. And on a broader level, I just don't accept, and I can't accept, what we do in Gaza. There isn't an excuse for killing 65 children in 12 days and say, that's the minimum that we had to do. There isn't an excuse for that.
Does Israel have the right to defend itself, being an occupier in Gaza?
Yes, I think every country has a right to defend itself. I think that every country has a right to defend its citizens. It's the number one commitment of a country to its citizens. Yeah? But we need to ask ourselves, is what we are doing, is it defending ourselves? Because what we are doing in the West Bank and Gaza is defending the occupation, defending the mission to occupy the Palestinians, defending the messianic aim to live in the whole of Israel, defending violent settlers. And when this is what we are doing, of course it's not legitimate. Every country has the right to defend itself, but we are just not defending ourselves.
And do Palestinians have the right to use violence in order to fight back against the occupation?
Look, I think that I am against violent resistance. I don't think violent resistance is a good way. That's what I think. I think that Palestinians who see soldiers invade their homes with weapons, I understand definitely why some Palestinians choose that path. But I don't think it's the right way.
But is it legitimate?
I don't think use of violence is legitimate.
Well, the United Nations thinks that is legitimate, right? Then an excerpt from the resolution 3743 signed in 82 reads, considering that the denial of the alienation rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, sovereignty, independence, and return to Palestinian and the repeated acts of aggression by Israel against the peoples of the region constitute a serious threat to international peace and security. And then again, below, the General Assembly reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle of peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle.
Okay.
And if we think, for example, of what happened in South Africa, or even what happened in the end of the Portuguese Empire in the ex-colonies, right? In Guinea-Bissau and in Mozambique and Angola, there was, maybe you can argue, a need for violence in order to fight back against the occupation and colonialism, right?
I understand. I still think that using violence, and I'm talking about also myself, is not the way to do it. People who are being attacked have the right to defend themselves, okay? But I don't think that the struggle to end what we're seeing in the occupied territories using violence is the way to do it. That's where I stand.
There has been what seems to be a never-ending cycle of elections in Israel for the past 2 years. Since April 2019, you've had 4 parliamentary elections, only the third of which actually led to a government being formed, and even then, only for a few months. The latest ones were in this past March. Can Benjamin Netanyahu actually lose his prime ministerial position?
It's a good question. I want to say yes, but I don't know. That's the truth. We're now in this process, the political process, and I can definitely say that Netanyahu is one of the worst things that have happened to the state of Israel. Yeah. Of course, the number one issue is always our control of the Palestinians, but not only because of that. Okay. And I want to say that what we see in the current political process, we can see. I can look at it from. Let's give it like 2 perspectives. Okay, so the optimistic perspective is that we have now a good number of parliament members that are against the occupation. Okay, that we can cooperate with. That's the good part. The bad part is that we can see a reality where the next prime minister will be someone who supports our goals, right? So it will be very hard to operate. We are always trying to cooperate with anyone who wants to talk about the occupation. So I think that we're as close as ever to replace Netanyahu. I'm very fearful from the results of that replacement talking about the occupation, because the likely replacements are not people who will do it any better than him, approach it any better than him.
But does the most recent massacre win him support?
I think that the most recent war was definitely in his interest. Yeah.
In 2018, the Knesset approved the Basic Law, or the nation-state law, which, amongst other things, states that the right to exercise national self-determination in the state of Israel is unique to the Jewish people. Is this the legal codification of apartheid?
Okay, so the question of apartheid, I think, is very interesting and extremely important. I want to say that let's look at it from, again, two angles. Okay, so what we see in the occupied territories, the policies that are enforced, the policies that we see segregated streets in Hebron, Palestinians are not allowed here and there, two different law systems that Palestinians are under the military rule and Israelis and internationals are under the Israeli criminal law. What we see in the occupied territories in the West Bank today, we can definitely see an apartheid regime. Okay? The question that you asked is really, I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer, okay? And it's really a legal question. But I do think it's important to ask ourselves if what we see in the occupied territories is apartheid, can we really say that some places in Israel is apartheid and some places aren't? And that's a question I don't have the answer to, but I want to raise here. I don't know.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure. It was really interesting to talk to you.
Esta entrevista foi preparada por mim, Ricardo Seves Ribeiro, o Nuno Viegas fez a edição, o Bernardo Afonso tratou do som, a fotografia da Joana Batista. Fazem ainda parte da equipa Fumaça Danilo Tomás, Margarida David Cardoso, Maria Almeida, Pedro Miguel Santos, Fia Rocha e Tomás Pinho. A música é dos Lotus Fever. Houve mais episódios em fumaca.pt ou na tua aplicação de podcast. Queremos fazer do Fumaça o primeiro projeto de jornalismo português totalmente financiado pelas pessoas. Se 20% das pessoas que ouviram esta entrevista se juntassem à nossa comunidade, seríamos 100% sustentáveis até ao final do ano. Considera fazer uma contribuição mensal recorrente em fumaca.pt/contribuir. Até já.